Kevin Costner is standing in the middle of the set, jaw tight, fists clenched, staring down Clint Eastwood in front of the entire crew. No actor had ever done this to Clint Eastwood in his entire career as a director, but Eastwood didn't raise his voice. He looked at the biggest movie star in the world and said 6 words that shut him down cold. But to understand why those words hit so hard, you need to know what Eastwood did to him 30 minutes earlier. Costner was called to set. He wasn't ready. He told Eastwood to wait. Eastwood turned to his crew and said, "Find his extra. Put a shirt on him." They shot the scene without Costner. His stand-in is in the final movie, and Costner had no idea until he saw the footage. Now, this wasn't some unknown actor Eastwood had just humiliated. In 1993, Kevin Costner was the biggest star on the planet. 2 years earlier, he'd won Best Picture and Best Director for Dances with Wolves. The year before this film, The Bodyguard made $400 million. Studios fought over him, directors begged to work with him, and Costner knew it. He was used to sets that moved at his pace. Multiple takes, time to prepare, the freedom to perfect every scene. Clint Eastwood was the opposite. 1 take, maybe 2. If you weren't ready when he called action, he moved on without you. In 30 years of directing, his cinematographer said he'd never once seen Eastwood raise his voice on set, never seen a single argument. So, what made Kevin Costner think he could change that? It all started with a phone caller made to Eastwood. A Perfect World was said to be a crime thriller about an escaped convict on the run through 1960s Texas. Eastwood agreed to direct, but had no interest in acting. The man had just won 2 Oscars for Unforgiven. Staying behind the camera sounded a lot easier than doing both. His first choice for the lead was Denzel Washington, but Costner wanted the role, and more than that, he wanted Eastwood in the film with him. Both names on the poster, 2 legends sharing the screen. So Costner did something bold, sat down with a screenwriter and rewrote Eastwood's character from the ground up, made him more complex, gave him more screen time, made him impossible to turn down. Eastwood read the new script and agreed to act. Costner got exactly what he wanted, but he didn't realize what he'd signed up for. From day one, the set felt off. Costner liked to prepare, work with dialect coaches, run scenes multiple ways, take his time finding the character. Eastwood didn't wait for anyone. His rule was simple. Know your lines, hit your mark, get it done. 1 take, move on. That's how he'd made nearly 20 films without ever going over budget or over schedule. Costner had never worked like this. On Dances with Wolves, his own film, production ran months over schedule. On The Bodyguard, scenes were reshot over and over until they felt right. But this wasn't Costner's set, this was Eastwood's. And Eastwood's sets ran like a train. You either kept up or you got left at the station. Costner was about to learn that the hard way. Filming was underway in Texas. The production was moving fast, exactly how Eastwood liked it. Then came the call for a simple scene. Costner walking through a field. Nothing complicated, just movement, atmosphere. The crew was ready. The cameras were set. Eastwood called for his lead actor. The message came back from Costner's trailer. "I'm not ready." Eastwood didn't ask twice. He turned to his crew and said 7 words that would change everything. Find his extra. Put a shirt on him. They dressed the stand-in, rolled cameras, shot the scene without Kevin Costner. And that footage, it made the final cut of the movie. Costner walked out of his trailer, ready to work. Eastwood looked at him and said, "Never mind, we're moving on." Costner froze, asked if Eastwood had just shot the scene with his stand-in. That's when Eastwood said the 6 words that shut him down. "I get paid to burn film." The crew went silent. Nobody moved. Costner had a choice, walk away or fight back. He fought back. What happened next was the only argument anyone had ever witnessed on a Clint Eastwood set. Costner got in Eastwood's face, told him he had no right to shoot without his lead actor, that the scene belonged to him, not some stand-in who happened to be wearing his shirt. Eastwood didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He told Costner the scene was done, the film was moving forward, and if Costner wanted to keep working, he'd better be ready when called. That was it. No screaming match, no threats, just Eastwood making one thing crystal clear. The schedule didn't stop for anyone, not even Kevin Costner. Costner backed down. The rest of the shoot finished on time, on budget, exactly like every other Eastwood film, but something had changed between them. They never worked together again. A Perfect World hit theaters in November 1993. Critics praised it, called Costner's performance one of the best of his career. Some reviewers said it was Eastwood's most underrated film as a director. Others called it a masterpiece hiding in plain sight. The French film journal Cahiers Cinéma went even further. They named it the best film of 1993. Better than Schindler's List, better than Jurassic Park, better than everything Hollywood had released that year. A French publication telling America that 2 of its biggest stars had made art, and America hadn't noticed. But American audiences didn't show up. The film made just $31 million domestically, a disappointment for 2 of the biggest names in Hollywood sharing the same screen, 2 Oscar winners, 2 box office giants, and the theaters were half empty. Still, nobody blamed Eastwood. The man had just won Best Picture. His reputation was untouchable. One underperforming film meant nothing against a legacy like his. He'd been making movies since before most of his critics were born. One stumble didn't define him. Costner wasn't so lucky. The whispers started. Maybe Dances with Wolves was a fluke. Maybe The Bodyguard was just Whitney Houston. Maybe Costner wasn't the guaranteed box office everyone thought he was. Maybe Hollywood had been fooled by a pretty face and a good year. The press that had built him up was now ready to tear him down. That's how Hollywood works. They love a rise, but they love a fall even more. And Costner had risen so fast, so high, the fall was going to be spectacular. But here's the thing most people missed about what happened on that set. Eastwood's 6 words weren't an insult, they were a warning. Stay in your lane. Trust the director. Don't waste time. The schedule doesn't bend for anyone, not even the biggest star in the world. The movie is bigger than you. The production is bigger than your feeling. Show up ready or get left behind. That's how Eastwood had survived 40 years in Hollywood. That's how he directed nearly 20 films without a single production disaster. No budget overruns, no scheduling nightmares, no public feuds with actors or studios, no stories leaking to the press about chaos on set. He knew something Costner didn't. Talent gets you in the room, discipline keeps you there. Every actor in Hollywood has talent. That's the baseline, the price of admission. The ones who last, the ones who build careers that span decades, they understand something deeper. They show up on time, they trust the process, they know that the film is bigger than their ego, they know that 100 people are standing around waiting while you sit in your trailer preparing. Eastwood had learned this lesson decades ago on the set of Rawhide. 8 seasons of television, 1 episode a week, no time for artistic indulgence. You knew your lines, hit your mark, and moved on. That's how TV worked. That's how Eastwood worked for the rest of his life. That discipline had carried him through 60 years in the industry, 4 Oscars, 40 films as a director, a legacy that would outlive everyone in that room. Costner heard those 6 words, but he didn't learn the lesson, and what happened next proved it. The year after A Perfect World, Costner starred in Wyatt Earp, a sprawling Western epic 3 hours long. His chance to prove Dances with Wolves wasn't a fluke, his chance to cement himself as the new king of the American Western. It got crushed at the box office by Tombstone, a film Costner had actually walked away from to make his own version of the story. Kurt Russell played Wyatt Earp in Tombstone, made it for half the budget, got twice the reviews. Costner watched from the sidelines as a movie he'd rejected outperformed the one he'd chosen. But that failure was nothing compared to what came next. In 1995, Kevin Costner released Waterworld, and everything Clint Eastwood had warned him about came true. The director was Kevin Reynolds, a man Costner had worked with 3 times before. Fandango, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Rapa Nui. They weren't just collaborators, they were friends. They'd built hits together, trusted each other, had a shorthand that came from years of working side by side. That friendship wouldn't survive this film. From day one, Costner fought for control. He wanted input on the story, input on his character's arc, input on every creative decision Reynolds tried to make. He wasn't content to be the star, he wanted to be the voice in every room, the final word on every choice. Reynolds called him a backseat director. The clashes got worse. Costner pushed. Reynolds pushed back. Every day brought a new argument, a new battle over how a scene should be shot, how a line should be read, how the story should unfold. The set turned into a war zone, and not the kind they were filming. Then there was the water. Steven Spielberg, the man who nearly lost his career filming Jaws on the ocean, personally warned Costner not to shoot on open water, told him it was a nightmare waiting to happen, told him about the mechanical sharks that didn't work. The weather that couldn't be controlled, the seasickness that turned actors into zombies. Spielberg had lived through it, barely survived it. He told Costner to learn from his mistakes. Costner ignored him. They shot in the Pacific Ocean off Hawaii, miles from shore, no control over the elements, no backup plan when things went wrong. And things went wrong immediately. Hurricanes hit a massive set. The floating atoll that cost millions to build sank to the bottom of the ocean. They had to rebuild the entire thing from scratch. Weeks of work, millions of dollars gone in a single storm, actors nearly drowned. Jean Triplehorn and a child actress were thrown from a boat when equipment snapped. A team of divers had to rescue them from the water. Costner nearly died. A storm came while he was strapped to a mast for a scene. His safety line snapped. He was left dangling in the wind, waves crashing around him while a rescue team scrambled to reach him. They pulled him from the water just in time. The production was supposed to take 96 days. It took 157. Costner worked 6 days a week for 5 straight months. His marriage fell apart during the shoot. Tabloids ran stories about his personal life. The set became a circus and not the kind anyone wanted to watch. The budget started at $100 million, then $135 million, then $175 million. The most expensive film ever made at the time. The press gave it nicknames: Fish Tar, Kevin's Gate, references to the biggest disasters in Hollywood history. The film was a punchline before it even hit theaters. And then Reynolds quit. 3 months before release, he walked off the film, said he couldn't work with Costner anymore, couldn't fight him on every decision, couldn't watch the movie he'd envisioned become something else entirely. A friendship that had survived 3 films couldn't survive this one. So Costner took over. He finished editing the film himself, fired the composer because the score was too bleak for his vision, hired a replacement at the last minute, made every decision Reynolds had been fighting against. They even brought in Joss Whedon to rewrite the script during production. Whedon later described the experience as 7 weeks in hell, called himself the world's highest paid stenographer because all he did was type up Costner's ideas, not his own vision, not creative collaboration, just transcribing whatever the star wanted. This was everything Eastwood had warned against. The delays, the ego, the refusal to trust the people around him, the belief that being a star meant the world should wait for you, the belief that you knew better than everyone else in the room. Eastwood made films on time, on budget, with 1 or 2 takes. Costner made Waterworld and nearly destroyed himself doing it. Waterworld opened in July 1995. The reviews were brutal. Critics called it bloated, excessive, a monument to one man's ego. The box office was worse, at least in America. The film made $88 million domestically against a $175 million budget before marketing costs, before distribution, before the millions spent convincing people to see a movie they'd already decided was a joke. International audiences saved it from total catastrophe. The film eventually made its money back, but the damage was done. Hollywood had a new punchline, and his name was Kevin Costner. He became the face of excess, the symbol of what happens when a star gets too much power. Studio executives used him as a warning. Don't let this become another Waterworld. Directors told stories about his behavior. Agents whispered to their clients about what not to do, but Costner didn't stop, didn't slow down, didn't learn. 2 years later, he made The Postman. Another epic, another massive budget, $80 million this time, another post-apocalyptic vision of America, another chance to prove everyone wrong. He directed it himself this time. No one to blame but Kevin Costner. It made $17 million. The film won 5 Razzie Awards, including Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Actor. All for Costner, the same man who had won 2 Oscars just 7 years earlier, was now winning awards for being the worst in Hollywood. In just 4 years, he'd gone from the biggest star in Hollywood to a cautionary tale agents whispered to their clients. The guy who had it all and threw it away. The guy who couldn't get out of his own way. The guy who proved that talent means nothing if you can't control your ego. Studios stopped calling. Directors stopped asking. The man who once had his pick of any project in town was now struggling to find work. The phone that used to ring off the hook went silent. Meanwhile, Clint Eastwood kept doing what he'd always done. Eastwood never commented on Costner's failures, never gave interviews about what happened on set, never said, "I told you so." Never gloated, never reminded anyone of those 6 words. He didn't have to. His work spoke for itself, while Costner was drowning in bad press and Razzie Awards. Eastwood kept making movies. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, True Crime, Space Cowboys. Not every film was a masterpiece, but every film came in on time, on budget, no drama, no headlines about chaos on set. Then in 2004, he directed $1 Million Baby, a story about a boxing trainer and a waitress with a dream. Small budget, no special effects, no reshoots, no drama, just a clean script, great actors, and a director who knew exactly what he wanted. It won Best Picture, Best Director, his second time taking home both. The same awards Costner had won 14 years earlier, back when the world thought he was the next Eastwood. Eastwood was 74 years old. Most directors half his age would kill for 1 Oscar. He had 4, and he wasn't done. 4 years later came Gran Torino. Eastwood starred as a racist Korean War veteran who learns to see the world differently, a small story about redemption and change. He shot the entire film in 33 days. No delays, no arguments, no egos clashing on set. It became his highest grossing movie ever as a lead actor, $270 million worldwide. Then American Sniper, the story of Chris Kyle, the deadliest marksman in U.S. military history. Another tight production, another focused shoot, another massive success, $547 million worldwide. The highest grossing war film in American history, made by an 84-year-old director who still showed up on time every single day. At 94 years old, Eastwood released Juror Number 2, still directing, still finishing on schedule, still under budget, still doing things his way, still proving that the method he'd used since 1971 was the only method that mattered, the same way he tried to show Kevin Costner back in 1993. 1 take, move on, don't waste time. The film is bigger than any star. Some lessons you learn from mentors, some lessons you learn from watching, some lessons you learn from failure. Costner had to learn the hard way. Costner eventually came back. It took 10 years, a decade of smaller roles, quieter films, projects that didn't require a $100 million budget or an army of publicists. He had to rebuild from the ground up, prove he could be trusted again, prove he'd changed. In 2003, he directed and starred in Open Range, a western made the old-fashioned way. Practical effects, real locations, no ego battles. He kept the budget reasonable, finished on time, let his collaborators do their jobs. Critics loved it, audiences showed up. It felt like redemption, like maybe he'd finally learned. Then came Yellowstone, a television drama about a Montana ranching family fighting to survive. Costner played the patriarch, a man who'd do anything to protect what he'd built. The show became a phenomenon. Millions of viewers, cultural impact, multiple spin-offs. Costner was relevant again. Not a punchline, not a cautionary tale, a star. But even that didn't last. Reports emerged of clashes with the showrunner, disputes over scheduling, Costner wanting more control, Costner leaving before the final season, the same patterns that had haunted him for 30 years showing up again when it mattered most. Some people change, some people just learn to hide who they are. Clint Eastwood never had a comeback because he never fell. He never needed redemption because he never lost his way. He just kept working, kept showing up, kept making movies his way, the way that had worked since before Kevin Costner was born. So, who was right? The answer was always obvious. It just took Costner a decade to see it. I get paid to burn film. 6 words. That's all it was. But those 6 words contained everything Costner needed to know about surviving in Hollywood. The schedule doesn't wait, the camera doesn't care about your feelings, the crew has families to go home to, and no amount of talent will save you if you can't get out of your own way. Eastwood understood that from day one, built a 60-year career on it, won 4 Oscars with it, earned the respect of every actor, director, and producer who ever worked with him. Costner had to lose everything to learn it, had to watch his career collapse, had to spend a decade in the wilderness, had to rebuild from nothing, and that's the difference between a legend and a cautionary tale. One of them listened to the lesson the first time, the other had to live it, but Kevin Costner wasn't the only star who underestimated Clint Eastwood. There was another confrontation years later with a director just as famous, a man who accused Eastwood of something so damaging it split Hollywood in half. Eastwood's response, 3 words that started a war. That story is next.